Good evening. On NDTV Profit, I'm Vikram Oza, and you're joining us here on The Big Question. And the trigger for The Big Question this evening is indeed the chaos that unfolded because of Indigo across India's airports. The country's largest airline. It has been forced now by the DGCA, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, to temporarily cut flights. And this after the operational stress has exposed just how concentrated India's skies have actually become. Indigo insists that it is back on its feet now. Flights are stabilizing, refunds are going out. But when you look at the larger picture, this is not a story about a short-term disruption. It is a story about long-term dependability, about reliance for the long term. Because when a single airline with nearly 65% market share sneezes, there is no doubt India's aviation system is bound to catch a cold. What was once a crowded sky, Jet, Kingfisher, legacy players, Air Deccan, you had all of them. There were others. Now that scenario has quietly turned into an effective duopoly between Air India and Indigo. These two airlines carry over 90% of India's flyers in what is already the world's third largest aviation market, and it's growing at double digits every year. Which is why the real big question: why doesn't a country of India's scale, of India's ambition, the kind of demand that we have, why doesn't India have more airlines? Is it still too risky? Is that the case? Because we do have high fuel taxes. ATF is very expensive. Is it about the dollar-denominated costs? Because they run very high. They are too prohibitive for new players to enter the sector. We've also heard about the difficulties that the aircraft makers, Boeing and Airbus, both of them, they're facing in recent times, at least, to deliver orders for aircraft on time. So is the issue a lot to do with aircraft shortages? And then, of course, there is the other factor, the price-sensitive market that India is, and that is talked about ad nauseum. Are the razor-thin margins really turning the investors away from Indian skies? But then, if those are the kind of constraints that we have, look at the other side of the coin. Hasn't this entire ecosystem fundamentally changed now? Don't we have better infrastructure? We certainly have many more than just 160 airports today. We have become a booming passenger demand market. And it's quite evident, not only in peak travel season, you see that demand around the year. And would it be false to assume that global capital is hunting for growth of this kind, the kind that Indian skies can actually deliver? Hence, crucially, we ask if international airlines, if investors, are they finally ready to bet on Indian aviation? Maybe through partnerships, maybe through equity stakes or new business models. Could they participate in a way that we haven't seen in the past? When earlier airlines collapsed, they collapsed under debt and high costs and poor planning. But that scenario hasn't changed enough. From an Indigo disruption story, we are zooming out to that bigger picture. We're talking about competition and capacity and the future of flying in India. Which is why I want to turn our attention, before we take this discussion, to our panelists. What did the Union Civil Aviation Minister say in Parliament? He speaks about the potential of the Indian aviation sector. He says this has room for at least 5 more airlines right now. Just listen into what he said.
We have envisioned the demand to be growing at such a rate that we want to have more airlines in the picture. And I have continuously said on the floor of the House, in both the Houses and outside also whenever I'm speaking, that India today has the capacity of 5 big airlines. We are talking about 2 airlines, but the capacity, the demand that India is creating today, we need to have 5 big airlines. This is the time to start an airline in India. This has been the time. There is so much growth that is happening, so let us all encourage more airlines to come into this industry along with the government.
So the minister says this is the time to invest in the Indian aviation sector. Why do we not have more players? That's the question. And let's turn to our panel. We have a great panel to ask this question to. Parvez Damania is with us. He's former executive director at Kingfisher Airlines and indeed the founder of Damania Airlines. That's another part of our aviation history, and it's good to have you back to tell us what it was like there. Jitendra Bhargava is also with us, former executive director at Air India, author of the Descent of Air India. And yes, Dr. Vandana Singh joins us, aviation expert, chairperson of the Aviation Cargo Federation of the aviation industry in India, and Sanjay Lazar here, an aviation expert as well. Great to have all of you. But let me turn to you, Mr. Damania, first. Tell us, what has changed from the time of the legacy airlines, and you were involved with Kingfisher, Damania Airlines in the past. Tell us what has fundamentally changed in operating an airline in the country.
See, fundamentally, major things that have changed is the government is supporting private airlines tremendously. In the past, when we started, the support to private airlines was negligible. Now things have changed, and the kind of load factors we are seeing are unbelievable. Nowhere in the world airlines are carrying load factors that Indian Airlines is carrying. Now, again, everything has changed, but at the same time, there are certain issues that are affecting the growth of the airline business. Of course, the Indian aviation is growing very, very fast. It's third largest market in the world and growing at unbelievable speed. But and another thing, let me tell you something, the kind of infrastructure that the government is coming up with, the kind of work that the BJP government is doing to improve the infrastructure, the aviation industry is huge. If the government hadn't created this kind of infrastructure for the growth wouldn't have occurred. Now, coming to the problem of what we are facing right now, one of the reasons your show is that why aren't more people coming in this business? See, I think the main reason is people are scared of this business. So that is why I think government has to come up with policies which will be very conducive for new companies to enter this business. I think it's a great business to be in. It has huge potential. And the way the country is moving and the way the people are flying, like the minister said, not 2 but 5 airlines can be accommodated. I have no doubt of that. The regional carriers are another space that is completely untapped. Even today, we have a huge number of airports that exist, but there is no facility, no planes are going there. So that is one more area that the growth is there. But our situation is very, very, we are in a very tricky situation. We are completely dependent on 2 airlines and more so just 1 airline.
Yes.
India cannot have the risk of having one company control 65% of the market.
Yes.
Nowhere in the world situation like that can arise.
So,
see, the problem is right now the situation is such, unless more players come, unless giant corporations come in, foreign industries come in, we are bound to have a situation we'll have to toe the line with Indigo. We may say whatever we want, they'll be punished, this, that sector will be cut, but ultimately...
It's quite clear. What you're saying is this over-consolidation that's happened in the aviation sector is not good in the long run. Mr. Bhargava, what do you make of it? It is not a good picture, Mr. Damania is pointing out. Then when the opportunity is so large, like he is saying, even when you're talking about the sectoral play that Indian aviation sector can be, why are we not finding enough investments coming in and more airlines in the fray?
See, we got to look at realistically. What the minister said in Parliament is a knee-jerk reaction to what we witnessed in the past week on Indigo front. When we were having 65 Indigo with 65% market share, it isn't that it has just come overnight. Indigo captured the market when Kingfisher collapsed, Jet Airways collapsed, Go First collapsed. Why did any other airline not be able to take away the market share of these collapsing airlines? Simply speaking, and let's take the post-2022 after Air India was disinvested and we had Air India under Tata's. Have they been able to nudge Indigo airline from anything below 60%? The answer is no. From 62% in 2023, it has climbed to 65% plus. Now, why has that happened? For the simple reason, Indigo is a dominant player. They are not only planning well, it's professionally managed, leave aside the last week and the big huge bungling they did. And when we look at from the perspective, they've already ordered 1,000 aircraft to capture the growth in the market that they're going to have. Now the question is, can more airline come in as the minister wishes? Akasa has been here. SpiceJet has been here. SpiceJet at one time had 16% of the market share, down to 4%. Why? Because the market conditions are very difficult. And once you are a dominant player, you have the pricing mechanism. You can manipulate it. And this is what happens, that though Indigo is a low-cost airline, on many sectors you will see that Indigo fares are higher than of the legacy carrier. The next question, of course, when we look at the past history, Jet Airways, Kingfisher, Air India, Vistara, were all legacy carriers.
Yes.
Air India still is.
Yes.
But they never could make profit. So they went wrong. Now, if we say that, look, Akasa is an airline run by professionals, are they being able to go? Indian market is growing. Yes, these airlines will also grow, but their market share will be constrained. They may not be able to cross 5-6% at best. For the simple reason, both Indigo and Air India have ordered huge aircraft for the future, and they will continue to maintain their market share. Unless one of the two groups cede market share, how will the other airline will grow?
So,
for the simple reason, we have to have some scale of operation for an airline to be profitable.
Right.
Government must look inwards and look at the high operational cost in India. It is not just a question of ATF being high.
Right.
Landing, parking, navigation charges, all are very high. Now, if the government is really keen that the low-cost carriers which come up now or are already existing must flourish,
right,
then the taxation system, operational costs will have to be reduced. Unfortunately, government is just saying that we want to do this without having a roadmap that this is the way forward. If you really need to break the monopoly of the two carriers, duopoly of the two carriers, which I feel very clearly is an impossibility at this stage, unless government says, look, we are going to put a limit, law, etc. But why should professionalism, why should growth, why should good working, productive airlines be punished for the kind of growth they witnessed?
So this low-cost carrier model, Dr. Vandana Singh, now that seems to have been cracked by Indigo. Now one wonders that they have captured this kind of market share right now, like Mr. Bhargava is pointing out as well. Is that turning out to be the real reason why investors are running scared? Mr. Damania used the word that investors are scared to enter the Indian market. So it's not so much the cost structures like the ATF taxation, Mr. Bhargava pointed out, the dollar exposure. Those may not be the scariest, but it's the kind of market share that already the two dominant players have that could be the possible reason why we're not seeing this, and that course correction needs to come from the government. Do you agree with that?
You see, it's a combination of a lot of factors. It's a combination of also what Mr. Damania said, as well as Mr. Bhargava. It's both. It's a lot that the government has to do. So it's not just that Indigo has a certain market share, which is highly dominant, and they've ordered X amount of aircrafts. We know the X amount of aircrafts are not going to come all one by one. We know Boeing and Airbus have their own issues out there. And we also know that Air India has ordered its own 500 equipments. So they are going to come in phases, or they're going to follow a certain timeline, right? In the same vein, there has to be a balance of all sorts. Now, if this statement has come, even if it's a knee-jerk reaction, I would say, let's look at it in a little positive perspective. Definitely, there can be some sort of a balance brought with an attractive, package laid out by the government. Everything, including slots or, rationalization of air turbine fuel, reducing the GST slab. All of this can be considered to attract more players in. Because having a duopoly there is very, very dangerous for us, guys, as we have already all witnessed. We cannot allow such a dangerous game.
Yes.
If we cannot allow such a dangerous game, then why not extend what we have, the UDAN incentives scheme that is for the second tier, three-tier country, three-tier states that we have.
Yes.
We have so many airports there, which are, now we are saying we are 174 functional, we are going to 400 functional airports. So there is a lot that the government can do. They can do viability gap funding as well. A lot where they can attract, and this is actually the right time to invest. This is the right time for players to be brought in,
right,
and investment to be done.
So,
exactly.
So again, now I feel like the onus is on the government. But if you look at the business model, and perhaps Sanjay, Lazar, you can tell us how you think about this, because the kind of the fleet standardization that we've seen Indigo do, or the kind of fast turnarounds that they have done, the sale and leaseback model that they brought in a huge way, is this now an established and real model that becomes the challenge for new players?
Well, Vikram, it's like this, that Indigo became the gold standard of operational efficiency, of slim operational efficiency. Let me be very clear. And there's a very fine line that divides operational efficiency from madness, and we saw that last week. To take a example, Indigo operates with 5.5 sets per aircraft of pilots and cabin crew on the Airbus, whereas you take an Air India which does 6.5 to 7, over 400 aircrafts at 1,000 pilot difference almost, and that is where Indigo fell down because some technical glitch started the dominoes falling and everything went to pieces. That being said, Indigo has set a benchmark, whether it's sale and lease back, whether it's taking large orders, mega orders and negotiating cheap prices, whether it's quick turnaround time. And you'll see even the legacy carriers, even Air India has now moved in. They've bought a lot of aircraft. Akasa has ordered 200 aircraft. But like Mr. Bhargav correctly pointed out, the rub of the green is taxation. Whether it's airports or whether it's the government or whether it's ATF, almost 50% of the fare goes into all these other pockets. So it's not very lucrative for somebody to come in. There's also a benchmark of 65% with Indigo and 28 odd with the Air India conglomerate. So for a new guy to come in, he's got to have really deep pockets and has to have backing. Very difficult because foreign airlines are not allowed 100% equity in India as yet. 49%, they'd have to partner with somebody unless they're NRIs. So there's still a lot of gaps in the rules that exist. And I think it's time that the government looks at it. If they're serious about having more airlines, I don't believe 5 will come in, but at least 2 more full service carriers and maybe another ultra low cost carrier to compete in the next few years. They'd have to, be lax with some regulations, make some changes and be more open. India, after all, is the largest, third largest market in the world,
Yes.
fastest growing on earth. So very important.
So, very, very important, all the points that all 4 of you are making. But Mr. Damania, today, if there is someone who is interested in the Indian aviation sector and is looking to make investments herein, maybe strategic, maybe otherwise, we don't know. But if they come to you and you're going to advise them, talk to us about the operational efficiency that is possible in India's aviation sector right now, because this low-cost flying model at one end and what the government has by way of the ease of doing business in the aviation sector, where things stand. What would you tell them?
Yeah, first and foremost, this whole story of low-cost carrier and full-service carrier, there's very little difference now left in India. For example, except for the meal, balance, everything is the same.
Exactly.
For example, even Indigo started Indigo Stretch, which is like a business class. So that sector is merged, and it's not that Indigo is selling fares, tickets very cheap because it's a low-cost carrier and Air India is selling expensive. That story is over. Everybody's more or less spending the same. See, I'll tell you something. We have to face reality. For any business house or anybody, or even any international airlines, if they're allowed, taking upon Indigo is a very tough task. It's going to take a lot of time. Like Mr. Bhargava said, 1,000 aircrafts on order.
Yeah.
1,000 aircrafts are not small. Indigo's placed one of the biggest orders in the world. Second thing we have to remember, one of your panelists said, Indigo's utilizing 5.5 sets per aircraft. That's very efficient. But at the same time, remember, just not 5.5 sets per aircraft. Look at the number of hours each aircraft is doing. You see, in the olden times, Mr. Bhargava might correct me if I'm wrong, Air India's fleet utilization was about 4.5 hours per day per aircraft.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, Indigo must be doing 12 to 13 hours. So not only are they flying, utilizing the crew to the maximum extent, but also utilizing the aircraft to the maximum extent. See, here where they floundered, they were cutting so fine that the minute the government rule changed, everything came crashing down.
Correct.
Of course, now they won't be able to survive with the new flight duty time limitation. They will have to make changes. But another thing, remember, even for them, by February to sort out this whole issue is not going to be easy.
Right.
Okay, sorry, I diverted from your question.
No, fair enough.
It's a great airline, great industry to be in. India is a huge untapped market.
Yes.
But there are strains. The government will have to come up with.
But just to take away from that point that you were making about the quick turnarounds and the model that we have right now, Mr. Bhargava, we have a scenario where Indigo right now is being asked to free up slots. But now the question is, will other airlines actually be able to use them? Or are we still stuck on that count because we don't have enough aircraft? There are shortages and we don't have crew availability as well. There are constraints on that count as well. So aren't those becoming the bigger bottlenecks?
No, let's put it this way. If there are bottlenecks in the supply chain of aircraft, it is applicable across all airlines. Even if Akasa is to order or they've ordered aircraft, even they will face the problem. So it's a question of a phased induction of aircraft number one.
Right.
Indigo perfected a model which ensured profitability. Let me give you a specific example. While Sanjay made a mention of the sets of pilots required per aircraft, their A321 aircraft has 190 seats. Air India's A321 had 150 to 155 seats. And yet, Indigo has a much higher load factor than what Air India gets it, even after privatization. So you look at the profitability. I would treat what has happened in the past 1 week as a monumental blunder on the part of management in trying to save money and not looking at the future. And then, of course, is the fact, if people say, did they deliberately do it? In my opinion, no airline would ruin its image to the way Indigo has ruined it in the last 1 week. And, 19 years of track record of professional management, profitable operations, sustained growth, getting onto the international calendar of the pride places that Indigo has got, it has happened. Now, what the government needs to do, why put a premium or why put restriction on Indigo's growth? That's one.
Yes.
Unless you can ensure that airlines like Akasa and SpiceJet can also be made to grow somehow or the other.
Yes.
Let's look at how many banks lost money when Kingfisher collapsed, Jet Airways collapsed, Go First collapsed. Will the funding be easy of the new carriers? No. Will Ambani or Adani come into the picture and say, okay, we are starting an airline with deep pocket and then we really have competition? Now, question is, the law also is very clear. Adani are in the airport business. The law is very clear that if you are a service provider, you can't be a service user also.
Right.
For running an airline.
Right.
So, it's a very complex issue. As I said earlier, Minister has made a statement that could be his wish list.
Right.
Ground realities speak a totally different language.
Right.
And I'm going to stick my neck out and say, let 3 months go by.
Right.
Once Indigo gets on to its normal operations, overcome the kind of problems it has, we will forget it and we will not discuss this issue again.
Right.
And we must look at, will Indigo climb from current 65% to 70%? We got to look at it.
So that is a distinct possibility, but getting 5 new airlines, that's not looking like a possibility, even 1 or 2 or 3. Sanjay, Lazar, what is the possibility of getting more airlines at this stage right now, considering all the hurdles that all 4 of you are pointing out?
Vikram, we consult quite often with foreigners and foreign institutional investors. Quite a few people have looked at India in the last few years, and let me tell you, they all run away when they come down to the brass tacks. Minister may have wishful thinking in Parliament and say 5 airlines will come in, but there is a market. But the barriers you've put in are so difficult. It's much like you go back to the Jet Airways days, and Mr. Damania is here. He ran one of the best airlines I've ever seen in my life when Damania began. And, we know what the other competitors, I don't want to name them, the kind of hurdles they created for him and the other guys to survive. You saw one by one others collapsing. And similarly, Indigo has become the old jet. That's about it, and they're dominant in such a way. Whether it's their connections, whether it's their aircraft, whether it's their fleet, everything, the new guy will be just battered. It's because the Tatas have taken over Air India.
Yes.
And their legacy brand, they are India. So nobody can mess with them.
Right.
They're holding strong. You try and get some other guy. You'll see Akasa is facing a great difficulty. Akasa has cried for 2 years for slots.
Right.
And Akasa already has 200 aircraft on order. So it's going to be very tough. But I hope there are more players because there is a market, whether it's regional or whether it's metro. There is a huge market and there is a game to be played here. Maybe the government should look at lowering barriers and making it more equitable slot distribution.
Yes. To recreate that entire era where we had multiple airlines and yes, Mr. Damania is extremely happy to hear about what has been said about Damania Airlines and Jet Airways.
Sanjay, thank you very much. And I learned very fast that this was an industry that was very tough to survive in.
Yes.
So I decided, let's make a brand and sell and get out at the right time.
Which you managed to do.
You may not remember this,
But the exit is not something that we are enthused about. Yes.
No,
my ex-wife was one of your first employees.
Sorry?
So
Happier
I said
employees
my
is at the heart of it. Happier
wife
employees
was
is at the heart of
employee.
it, and that's typically what an aviation sector is going to thrive on, and it's something that most industries will recognize as the driver of businesses for the future, for the present. But indeed, I'm running out of time. This disruption that Indigo has caused, it may be settling now, but it has exposed a far bigger reality that India's skies, they are booming, demand is soaring, competition remains very thin, very, very thin. The opportunity, of course, like everyone is agreeing, is massive. But the risks are there too. And some of those risks are inbuilt in the rules and regulations that we have. Whether India can truly support more airlines is going to depend not just on ambition, but on costs and policy. Policy is going to be a key driver. Discipline and execution, that's what I'm taking away from this discussion. My thanks to our panelists, Parvez, Damania, Jitendra Bhargava, Dr. Vandana Singh, Sanjay, Lazar. Thank you very much. It's been insightful talking to you on The Big Question this evening. Thanks indeed. And yes, viewers, we will be tracking the aviation story as we have the big stories that are driving our headlines. But for the moment, from me, Vikramosa, and the entire team, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great evening ahead.